Agatha Christie had been absent for 11 days when law enforcement made an unusual discovery. She was residing in a hotel hundreds of miles away with no recollection of how she had arrived. Christie provided one interview concerning her disappearance, and the inconsistencies in her narrative revealed her most profound secret. Regarding Agatha Christie, her intricate family history is the initial enigma to unravel. Although her family was affluent, her parents' background is somewhat unsettling. Her mother Clara's family had dispatched the 9-year-old girl to reside with her aunt. That aunt had a 17-year-old stepson named Frederick. Well, at some juncture, presumably when Clara was somewhat older, the duo developed romantic feelings. They produced 3 offspring, the youngest being Agatha. Agatha's upbringing was unremarkable and joyful, albeit somewhat solitary due to the age disparity between her and her siblings. This was not ameliorated by her mother's peculiar educational strategy for her. Despite her siblings attending school, Clara aspired to educate Agatha herself and did not wish her to acquire literacy until the age of 8. Well, nothing could deter a restless and isolated Agatha from her aspirations. She mastered reading by the age of 4 and immersed herself in a realm of imagination until it all came to an abrupt halt. When Agatha was merely 11 years old, her family endured a harrowing tragedy. Her cherished father succumbed to pneumonia and chronic kidney disease. As she later reminisced, his demise signified the conclusion of her childhood. And that was not the sole predicament. The family lacked substantial funds without him, and her siblings had relocated, leaving her alone with her mother. Despite their financial challenges, the Christie family managed to dispatch Agatha to a sequence of reputable schools. It was there she commenced to truly discover her equilibrium. Agatha may not have flourished in the music curricula as anticipated, but the social milieu, in contrast to her solitary upbringing, appeared to have been beneficial for her. Following graduation, she initiated writing short stories. Regrettably, this was not an instantaneous success saga. She was the recipient of numerous rejection letters, but her tenacity would, in this instance, prove to be a redeeming quality. Agatha persevered and composed her inaugural novel, Snow Upon the Desert. Unhappily, she was in for a profound disappointment. Not merely one, but 6 distinct publishers declined her work. A glimmer of hope emerged when a renowned novelist introduced her to his agent, who subsequently informed her he did not desire the book. Publishers may not have coveted Agatha Christie, but numerous men did. She was attractive and amiable, with a vibrant social calendar. Consequently, Agatha had a plethora of admirers. She anticipated matrimony, but none of the men she encountered truly made a durable impression. However, another man did, and this one possessed staying power. Archibald Christie approached Agatha at a dance and requested 3 dances on her card, which was the convention at the time. Following the initial 2, Archie solicited 3 more, which was rather unconventional. He left an indelible mark on Agatha, which was advantageous because he had already resolved to wed her. After 3 months, he proposed. There was merely one impediment, though. Archie had relentlessly pursued her for months. Agatha was already betrothed, in fact, to someone she genuinely favored. But although Reggie Lucy had proposed, he had also vacillated to expedite matrimony. It was an error that would ultimately prove detrimental to their relationship. After they separated, Agatha was at liberty to accept Archie's proposal, but that was not their sole obstacle. Agatha did not wish to delay marrying the man she perceived as the love of her life, but her mother was striving to maintain her home, and Archie lacked funds. She informed Archie that she could not wed him because she was obligated to support her mother. Well, after the hurdles he had surmounted thus far, Agatha and Archie endured a protracted engagement, but it was not because they were becoming acquainted. Archie was an aviator, and when World War I erupted, he departed for France to engage in combat. When he returned home for Christmas in 1914, they hastily wedded with the limited time they possessed together. To state there was no honeymoon would be an understatement. Agatha and Archie Christie spent the initial 6 months of their marriage separated. While Archie battled, Agatha contributed to the war effort in Britain. Despite her extensive hours at the Red Cross, she remained solitary without her husband. And what transpires when Agatha Christie is unaccompanied? Well, she commits pen to paper. While collaborating with the Red Cross in 1916, Agatha encountered numerous Belgian soldiers and refugees. These men would serve as inspiration for her newest character, Hercule Poirot, an astute Belgian detective. He became the focal point of her second novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Two distinct publishers rejected it before one ultimately consented to adopt it. The Bodley Head Publishing House assigned her for 5 novels, but Agatha was oblivious to what she was entering into. Like many nascent artists and authors, Agatha Christie was merely gratified that someone finally aspired to endorse her work. But she did not comprehend there was a sinister aspect to the contract she had just executed. The remuneration was not substantial, and she was now ensnared with them for 5 books. As her renown commenced to escalate, the perception that they were exploiting her also intensified. While Agatha grappled with the professional facet, the culmination of World War I signified that her personal life was ultimately able to proceed at full throttle. After Archie returned home, Agatha conceived and delivered a healthy, exquisite baby girl. They christened her Rosalind. But as we shall observe, not everything was idyllic in paradise. During the 1920s, the British Empire exhibition was traversing the globe to promote the final vestiges of the empire. Agatha and her spouse Archie were both implicated in the promotion of said exhibition, and they approached it with zeal. The Christies toured the world alongside the exhibition, venturing as far as South Africa and New Zealand. But there was a melancholy aspect to the global peregrinations. They were compelled to abandon their young daughter for months at a time. It appeared as though the Christies were ultimately obtaining the honeymoon that World War I had deprived them of. But upon their return home, they were in profound difficulty. They were virtually destitute. When Agatha broached their monetary predicaments, Archie's reaction was callous. He proposed that she relocate back with her mother. Agatha rebuffed his notion and instead commenced composing more, this time with augmented success. Archie secured employment with the City of London, and Agatha's writing commenced to flourish. With the funds they generated, they acquired an automobile and a residence, which they christened Styles after her inaugural mystery novel. But all the novel, lustrous possessions in their life could not obscure the fissures that were commencing to manifest. For one, it appeared as though Archie preferred to fritter away the hours on the golf course rather than spending time with his family. When Agatha proposed they endeavor for another child, he provided her with an emphatic refusal. Agatha appeared unperturbed by her husband's apathy and immersed herself in concluding her newest novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It would proceed to become one. Despite all their tribulations, the loss of Agatha's father, and all their financial quandaries, they had remained exceptionally close. The loss of her mother propelled Agatha into a downward spiral. She attended the funeral unaccompanied, as Archie was in Spain. But even upon his return, he abandoned her alone at her mother's residence while he frequented his club in London. Presently, it became excessively burdensome. Following her mother's demise, the press commenced to disseminate reports that the ascendant mystery novelist Agatha Christie had departed London for Barat, Switzerland, to recuperate from a nervous breakdown. They asserted that she was utterly enervated from laboring herself to the extreme. Irrespective of whether this was factual, one matter was unequivocal. The amalgamation of career pressures, her husband's conduct, and the loss of her mother had truly wreaked devastation upon Agatha. Regrettably for Agatha, the nadir was yet to materialize. In August of 1926, Archie made a disconcerting avowal. He had been engaging in a protracted affair with a young woman he had encountered on the golf course. Her name was Nancy Neal, and they had been carrying on for a staggering 18 months. Agatha was astounded. She had never suspected a thing. And then, as the verity solidified, so did the sentiment of anguish and revulsion. For months, Archie had appeared like a stranger, and now it all became lucid. Here is where the perfidy cut even deeper. In more propitious times, Agatha frequently extended invitations to friends to sojourn with them at Styles. She had in fact invited Nancy on numerous occasions, and Nancy had acquiesced. To exacerbate the insult, the majority of individuals in their social circle were cognizant of the liaison. Now Agatha was not merely aggrieved, she was mortified. Archie promptly departed for 2 weeks. Agatha had her sister and her secretary to confide in, but neither could furnish her with the resolutions she was pursuing. Her sister informed her they would reconcile, but her secretary was more despondent, stating, "He will not remain." Agatha implored him to grant the marriage another opportunity, proposing a year-long trial period. Ever the empathetic type, Archie would only consent to 3 months. Agatha endeavored what she could to ameliorate matters, and the duo embarked on a vacation together. It was tranquil and uneventful, but upon their return home, they relapsed into their former habits. To compound matters, Agatha's publisher was soliciting her subsequent novel, and magazines were clamoring for stories. She could have utilized the leisure time, but when Archie concocted excuse after excuse to depart the house, it merely intensified her ire. Their altercations commenced as vociferous exchanges and escalated into Agatha hurling a teapot at Archie. He may have been the one engaged in an 18-month-long dalliance, but for Archie it was a transgression too far. By late 1926, Agatha was akin to a grenade with the pin extracted, poised to detonate at any moment, and Archie was the one who erred by dropping her. On the morning of December 3rd, he informed her that he could not spend the weekend with her. Ultimately, she elicited from him that he would be spending it with Nancy and that he aspired to wed her. Agatha finally had to confront the reality. Archie departed for work, and Agatha and Rosalind spent the day with his mother, who discerned that Agatha was behaving capriciously. Later that evening, Agatha dined unaccompanied and awaited Archie's return. He never materialized. At approximately 9:45 p.m., she entered her automobile and embarked on a drive. Though Agatha was accustomed to constructing mysteries, not even she could have foretold what would transpire next. Someone else contacted the authorities to apprise them, and they promptly ascertained the name of the automobile's proprietor, Agatha Christie. The writer, however, was nowhere to be located. It appeared like something extracted from one of her novels, but in actuality, it was something even more peculiar. The authorities presented themselves as Styles and apprised Secretary Charlotte that it appeared Agatha was missing. She contacted Archie, who was naturally with Nancy. His reaction was characteristically apathetic. He returned and asserted he possessed no cognizance of his wife's whereabouts and that she had not imparted anything to him, or so he professed. Archie Christie maintained a composed demeanor with the authorities, but he was concealing a secret. Upon his return to Styles, he had discovered a note that Agatha had bequeathed him. Before anyone else had an opportunity to peruse it, he incinerated it. It does not necessitate a mystery writer to comprehend that is exceedingly suspicious behavior. Agatha had also bequeathed a letter for her secretary, Charlotte, which furnished at least a few additional clues. She mentioned that Charlotte should annul Agatha's weekend arrangements and that she cannot remain in this house any longer. When the detectives probing her disappearance became cognizant of the discord between Agatha and Archie, they commenced to apprehend that she had committed something drastic and intensified the search. Regrettably, this attracted the attention of the press. Her narratives may have been wildly popular, but Agatha was an exceedingly private individual. Unhappily, after she was missing for a few days, the authorities had no alternative but to disseminate a missing persons notice. Archie's apprehensions were twofold. One, that the case would expose his affair with Nancy Neal to the public, and two, that his infidelity had perhaps impelled Agatha to take her own life. Ultimately, only one of these outcomes would materialize. Agatha's name was generating headlines in the UK and even ascended to the front page of the New York Times. As the local authorities assembled search parties, another clue surfaced. Agatha had dispatched a letter following her disappearance, sometime in the early morning on Saturday the 4th. She had inscribed to Archie's brother Campbell, apprising him she intended to visit an unspecified spa in Yorkshire. The tenor of the letter did not furnish any indications as to Agatha's mental state or anything else. But at the very least, the authorities now possessed another intimation as to where she might be. However, when the authorities comprehended that Archie had spent Friday evening with Nancy at a friend's residence in what staff at the time denominated an unofficial engagement party, they commenced to consider him a suspect in Agatha's disappearance. After all, during one of their more substantial altercations, Agatha had informed Archie that she would never countenance a divorce. It was also during this epoch that investigators unearthed that he had incinerated a letter from Agatha. He declined to divulge its contents to them. Between this and the incessant importuning from the press, Archie was commencing to fracture, just as his wife had. On Friday, December 10th, a mere 7 days since Agatha's disappearance, the Daily Mail disseminated an interview they had conducted with Archie. In it, he asserted that Agatha had discoursed about how facile it would be to vanish before. He also insinuated that she had vanished voluntarily or had experienced some sort of episode over the prospect of murder or suicide. Other mystery writers became implicated in the search as well. Novelist Dorothy L. Sayers presented herself at one search, perusing the vicinity for a minute, and then authoritatively declared that Agatha was not present. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the progenitor of Sherlock Holmes, relinquished one of Agatha's gloves to a medium, who asserted that she was still extant and that she would reappear the subsequent Wednesday. It was all rather sensational, but the authorities were imminently to acquire a significant lead in the case. Staff at a spa hotel in Harrogate, Yorkshire, commenced a report that one of their guests bore a resemblance to Agatha. Authorities deemed it most prudent to permit someone proximate to her to effectuate the identification, so they awaited Archie's arrival there. Late on Tuesday, December 14th, Archie had identified the woman as his wife, Agatha Christie. One peculiar clue had rendered the authorities and the press certain that she was Agatha. She had registered at the hotel utilizing the surname Neal, as in Archie's paramour. Agatha had been at the hotel for 10 days. Other guests had even observed her perusing the news concerning her own disappearance. Yet none had recognized her as the author, or if they had safeguarded her privacy. After all, numerous renowned guests frequented the hotel, preferring to remain incognito, and thus the query of where had been elucidated, but what about all the others? When the authorities interrogated Agatha regarding the matter, her response was astonishing. She asserted she had been in a bewildered state when she departed home, could not recollect any of the preceding days, and that she was merely recalling who she was again now after encountering Archie. To state they were skeptical would be an understatement, and they possessed valid reasons to be. When she convened to converse with Archie, Agatha disclosed the convoluted verity. She stated that she had orchestrated the disappearance after comprehending her marriage was genuinely and irrevocably concluded. And that was not the most peculiar aspect. She had possessed an ally, and no, not her secretary Charlotte. She had enlisted her brother's wife Nan, who had spent the intervening days feigning profound distress at Agatha's disappearance. Then she divulged how she had executed it. Agatha had premeditated many of the particulars of her disappearance as meticulously as she did the plot of her books. She abandoned a fur coat, a valise of attire, and her driver's license inside the automobile to create the semblance that something dire had transpired. Then she had propelled the automobile off the road in neutral, ensuring to leave the headlights illuminated to attract attention. Agatha then embarked on a train to London, where she sojourned the night with her sister-in-law Nan. But what objective was all this serving? It appeared as though Agatha intended to remain absent for 3 or 4 days, merely to compel Archie to agonize over his actions. But there was one element she had not anticipated. She had inscribed her letter to Archie's brother and dispatched it to his workplace over the weekend, anticipating that when he received it, he would dispatch the authorities to the spa at Harrogate to locate her. Regrettably, they never arrived, and the procrastination engendered an unintended consequence. Despite the histrionic nature of her antics, Agatha Christie was, lest we overlook, an exceedingly private individual. If the authorities had discovered her at Harrogate on Monday or Tuesday, as she had intended, it is entirely plausible the press would not have apprehended the narrative at all. After all, one can plot a mystery novel to perfection, but while some readers will decipher it early, many can remain oblivious. Agatha Christie swiftly retreated to her residence, away from the prying scrutiny of the press, whom she declined to address. Neither they nor the general populace was privy to much more than the bare particulars of her disappearance and discovery and a claim of amnesia. Consequently, the backlash was immediate and brutal. Many conjectured that it was a publicity stunt, or, even more appallingly, a scheme to incriminate Archie for murder. Back at home, the press importuned Agatha and Archie for particulars, while the authorities engaged in deliberations concerning the transference of the cost of all the searches to the Christie family. And while Agatha envisioned she and Archie would persist in enduring the year-long trial period he had never consented to, she ultimately had to confront the harrowing reality. Her marriage was terminated. This time, as opposed to a mysterious disappearance, Agatha engineered another form of escapade, an extensive sojourn to the Canary Islands in Spain. Both her daughter Rosalind and her secretary Charlotte accompanied Agatha on the expedition. But there was naturally a disagreeable matter to address back home. When Agatha and Archie ultimately broached the subject of divorce, they discovered themselves in a brutal impasse. Agatha could divulge his affair to the world and engender all manner of adverse attention to Nancy Neal. But if Archie elected, he could expose the verity concerning her disappearance, that it was contrived and not part of an amnesic episode. Archie consented to grant Agatha custody of Rosalind, provided they each maintained silence. Agatha and Archie ultimately obtained their divorce in 1928. To exacerbate the insult, Archie wedded Nancy Neal a mere week after the courts finalized it. When Rosalind returned to school, Agatha was solitary once more, but not for long. While Agatha was contemplating her subsequent expedition abroad, she made an impetuous decision to annul what she had already reserved and embark on the Orient Express to Baghdad. It would ultimately transform her life. There she encountered a British archaeologist named Max Mallowan. It was not long before the duo developed romantic feelings. Agatha had ultimately discovered love once more, after 2 of the most arduous years of her life. Preceding her divorce, Agatha harbored numerous reservations, as did those closest to her. One of the principal predicaments in her relationship with Archie, apart from his affair of course, was that she generated considerably more revenue than him but declined to permit him to possess any. Agatha scrutinized her past prior to accepting Max's proposal of marriage. She formulated 2 stipulations for him. Firstly, they would divide everything equitably, including the proceeds from her books. Secondly, he had to vow never to engage in golf. Was it a felicitous denouement? Well, yes and no. Agatha persisted in producing novels at a prolific rate, and the recollection of her disappearance receded into the past. She resided contentedly with Max until the eruption of World War II, when he departed to serve in North Africa. As she had during World War I, Agatha occupied her time by volunteering at a hospital pharmacy. But as she expended each day, documenting what she ascertained about antecedent poisons to utilize the information while crafting plots for novels, someone was observing her. During World War II, the British intelligence agency MI5 inaugurated an inquiry into the cherished author Agatha Christie. Her 1941 book, N or M, featured a character named Major Bletchley. MI5 apprehended it was a reference to the clandestine code-breaking center denominated Bletchley Park, and that she possessed an informant on the interior. Christie's elucidation for this coincidence was that she had been stranded at Bletchley Park while en route to London, and she employed the name for one of her least amiable characters as an act of trivial retribution. Undoubtedly, MI5 was assuaged to learn that Agatha conceived 2 of the most beloved characters in fiction, Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. Shockingly, Christie actually abominated Hercule Poirot. She denounced him as a detestable, bombastic, tiresome, egocentric little creep. Consequently, whenever she would stage theatrical adaptations of her own novels, she would entirely expunge him from the narratives whenever feasible. Even following Max's return from World War II, Agatha's output never decelerated. She published an average of 1 novel annually, even as her health deteriorated. While readers frequently scrutinized her work for revelations concerning her mysterious disappearance, it was her final novel that furnished the most harrowing glimpse into the somber verity concerning her final years. Experts who examined her work conjecture that the alterations in her writing style indicate she may have been experiencing Alzheimer's or dementia. Agatha Christie succumbed to natural causes at her residence in January of 1976. She was 85 years of age. In her lifetime, she vended over 300 million tomes, and at the time of her demise was the best-selling novelist in history. Agatha's aptitude for crafting mysteries has solidified her position in history. While she remained predominantly taciturn, Agatha actually disrupted her silence on the subject of her disappearance in a long-forgotten interview with the Daily Mail in February 1928, approximately 14 months later. She asserted that she was dazed and had forfeited memory, following striking her head in the automobile, culminating at Harrogate, believing she was a woman from South Africa named Tessa Neal. Though her narrative possessed so many lacunae, her own Poirot would require mere seconds to penetrate it. For one, she had employed the name Teresa Neal to register, and for another, memory loss and secondary personality do not transpire in tandem. If she genuinely was an amnesiac, she would have been racking her intellect endeavoring to recollect who she was, which does not accord with all the accounts of her remarking on her similarities to the images of Agatha that appeared in the newspaper. But did she ever confess? In her autobiography, Agatha fabricated assertions concerning how destitute she was during and subsequent to the dissolution of her marriage, which for many women of the epoch would have been a genuine predicament. There is merely one quandary: it was not veracious. Following her mother's demise, Agatha inherited a munificent sum of money, which does not encompass the fact that her career was burgeoning. So why prevaricate? Well, no one crafts a narrative quite like Agatha Christie. She rendered herself appearing beleaguered by both marital tribulations and financial exigency, the quintessential setup for a comprehensive mental collapse. While Christie never explicitly mentions what transpired in her autobiography, she certainly insinuates that those were contributing factors. Consistent with the nature of her books, this episode in her life remains a comprehensive enigma to this day. Thank you for watching History Expose. If you appreciate unearthing the most compelling narratives in history, hit like and subscribe to persist in exploring with us. Do not neglect to visit our principal page, Fact in A, for additional incredible facts concerning everything.